Everyone, how are you? Sorry, I did comb my hair, but I wanted to just come on live and talk about the tyranny of a majority from Tocqueville's perspective. And this is an excerpt that I have, but it talks about it gives a good picture of what he said, and and I think that we've lost some of the vision our founding fathers had today. And I see some of Tocqueville's ideas flourish, and he's as my husband put it, he's very prophetic in his writing. And even though he's talking in terms of 1830, you could see some of the dangers today in 2021. So let me begin. On tyranny of the majority, sovereign power must be placed somewhere, right? And precautions which one should take to moderate its action. These precautions have not been taken in the United States. So, what is he saying? So I thought that Madison clearly put tyranny of the majority up there, and he took precautions to cure that. But Tocqueville's saying that the precautions are not there. So what is he saying? Then he says, I regard it as impious and detestable maxim that in matters of government, the majority of the people has a right to do everything, and nevertheless I place the origin of all power in the will of the majority. There is one law which has been made, or at least adopted, not by the majority of that people, but the majority of all men, and that is the law of justice. Justice, therefore, forms a boundary to each person's right. A nation is like a jury, entrusted to represent universal society and to apply the justice which is the law. When I refuse to obey an unjust law, I by no means deny the majority's right to give orders. I only appeal from the sovereignty of the people to the sovereign of the human race. A nation cannot go completely beyond the bounds of justice and reason, and that there is therefore no need to fear giving total power to the majority representing it. But that is a language of slave. What is a majority? In its collective capacity, if not an individual with opinions, and usually with interests contrary to those of another individual, called the minority. Have men, by joining together, changed their character? By becoming stronger, have they become more patient of obstacles? I will never grant to several that power to do everything which I refuse to a single man. And he says, omnipotence in itself seems a bad and dangerous thing. I think that its exercise is beyond man's strength, whoever he be, and that only God can be omnipotent without danger, because his wisdom and justice are always equal to his power. So there is no power on earth in itself so worthy of respect or vested with such a sacred right that I would wish to let it act without control and dominate without obstacles. That is forbidden to people or king, democracy or aristocracy, and whether the scene of action is a monarchy or a republic. I say the germ of tyranny is there. I will go look for other laws under which to live. My greatest complaint against democratic governments, as organized in the United States, is not, as many Europeans make out, its weakness, but rather its irresistible strength, most repulsive in America, the shortage of guarantees against tyranny. And we're seeing that today. There is a shortness of guarantees against tyranny. I mean, you could see it in Biden trying to impose and ram down mandates down our throat or down our back, breathing down our backs so that we do a certain way and obey him. He's not omnipotent. When a man or a party suffers an injustice in the United States, to whom can he turn? The courts? To public opinion? The media? That is what forms a majority. To the legislative body, it represents the majority and obeys it blindly. To the executive power, it is appointed by the majority, serves as a passive instrument. To the police, it's been defunded. They are nothing but the majority under arms. A jury? Today they're ignorant, those jurors. The majority vested with the right to pronounce judgment. Even the judges in certain states are elected by the majority. But suppose you were to have a legislative body so composed that it represents the majority without being necessarily the slave of its passions, an executive power having a strength of its own, and a judicial power independent of the other two authorities. Then you would still have a democratic government, but there would be hardly any remaining risk of tyranny. I'm not asserting that at the present time in America there are frequent acts of tyranny. I do say that one can find no guarantee against it there, and that the reason for the government's gentleness must be sought in circumstances and the mores rather than in the laws. And today we see tyranny, and we see exactly what he is talking about by checks and balances on tyranny. The power exercised in America over thought, when the majority has irrevocably decided about the question, it is no longer discussed. Why? Moral authority exercised by the majority over thought. Democratic republics have turned despotism into something immaterial. Thought is an invisible power, and one almost impossible to lay hands on, which makes sports of all tyrannies. In our day, the most absolute sovereign in Europe cannot prevent certain thoughts hostile to their power from silently circulating in their states and even their own courts. And you can't even silence power online effectively either. And in America, it shouldn't be. In America, it is not like that in America. While the majority is in doubt, one talks. But when it is irrevocably pronounced, everyone is silent, and friends and enemies alike seem to make for its bandwagon. The reason is simple. No monarch is so absolute that he can hold all the forces of society in his hands and overcome all resistance. As majority invested with the right to make the laws and to execute them can do. A king's power is physical only, controlling actions, but not influencing desires. The majority is invested with both physical and moral authority, acts as upon the will as upon behavior, and at the same moment prevents both the act and the desire to do it. And no country is less independent of mind and true freedom of discussion than in America. There is no religion or political theory which one cannot preach freely in the constitutional states of Europe, or which does not penetrate into the others, for there is no country in Europe so subject to a single power that he who wishes to speak the truth cannot find support enough to protect him against the consequences of his independence. Unlikely enough to live under an absolute government. If he lives in a free country, like America, he needs to find shelter behind the royal authority. He may, at need, find shelter behind the royal authority. In democratic countries, the aristocracy may support him, but in democracy organized on the model of the United States, there is only one authority, one source of strength and of success, and nothing outside it. In America, the majority has enclosed thought within the formidable fence. A writer is free inside that area, but woe to the man who goes beyond it, now that he stands in fear of the auto da fe. But he must face all kinds of unpleasantness and everyday persecution. A career in politics is closed to him, for he has offended the only power that holds the keys. For those who condemn him express their views loudly, while those who think as he does, but without his courage, retreat into silence, as if ashamed of having told the truth. Formerly, tyranny used the clumsy weapons of chains and hangman. Nowadays, even despotism, though it seemed to have nothing more to learn, has been perfected by civilization. Contemporary democratic republics have turned it into something as intellectual as the human will. It is intended to contain, under the absolute government of a single man, despotism to reach the soul, clumsily stuck at the body, and the soul, escaping from such blows, rose gloriously above it. But in democratic republics, that is not at all how tyranny behaves. It leaves the body alone and goes straight for the soul. The master no longer says, "Think like me, or you die." You are free not to think as I do. You can keep your life and property, all but from this day you are a stranger among us. You can keep your privileges in the townships, but they will be useless to you, for if you solicit your fellow citizens' votes, they will not give them to you, and if you only ask for their esteem, they will make excuses for refusing you. Remain among men, but you will lose your rights to count as one. Approach your fellows, they will shun you as an impure being, and even those who believe in your innocence will abandon you too, lest they in turn be shunned. Literary genius cannot exist without freedom of the spirit, and there is no freedom of the spirit in America. The American majority's sway extends further and has rid itself even of the thoughts of punishing such books. One finds government striving to protect Moors by condemning the author of licentious books, but no one is tempted to write them. Not that all the citizens are chaste in their morals, but those of the majority are regular. Power is well used, the nature of power in itself. So, what do you think? Comment below and let me know what you think about tyranny of the majority. Thank you very much, and of thought.